Welcome, everybody, to the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, the Placer County Airport Land Use Commission, and the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. It's Wednesday, October 23rd at 9 a.m. Now we'll begin with the flag salute. Please join us in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Scoot right on back up.
Will the clerk be kind enough to call the roll?
Howard.
Here.
Broadway. Here. Burris. Clark-Kretz. Here. Holmes.
Here.
Joyner.
Here.
Mackey. Here. Euler. Here. Wright. Here.
All right, looks like we have a quorum. No closed session?
No, sir.
All right, thank you for that. We'll move to item D, approval of action minutes, September 25th, 2019.
Second.
All righty, it's been moved and seconded to approve the action minutes of September 25th, 2019. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? Hearing none, motion is passed. Agenda review, did you want to talk about our?
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the board, you have before you a revised agenda shown in yellow highlight, and the purpose of that revised agenda is to move item J after item L, so that we have the action or the budget item in logical order with the actual item. So we'd ask, respectfully request that you make that change to the agenda, sir.
All righty, and thanks for highlighting it for us. All righty, any concerns about agenda review? Okay. Now is the time for public comment. Anyone that wishes to address the agency board on items that are not on the agenda, please come forward and state your name and we'll give you 3 minutes. Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move to our item G, the consent calendar for the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. These items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Are there any items on the consent calendar that anybody wishes to remove for discussion? Hearing none, anyone in the audience? Hearing none, I'll ask for approval.
Move approval.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency consent calendar. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none. Now it's time, item H is the 9 a.m. public workshop, 2019 Unmet Transit Needs Process and Schedule, presented by Kathleen Hanley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Today we have our Unmet Transit Needs public hearing. For some background, as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency for Placer County, one of PCTPA's responsibilities is to administer Transportation Development Act funds. Those funds come from two sources, diesel tax revenue and sales tax revenue, which goes up to the state, and then they redistribute it back down to the Regional Transportation Planning Agencies into two funds, State Transit Assistance and the Local Transportation Fund. Today we're here to talk about the Local Transportation Fund, which in Placer County we use largely to fund public transit services. Here in Placer County we have 6 transit operators, which includes 4 bus operators, Roseville Transit, Auburn Transit, Placer County Transit, and Tahoe Truckee Area Regional Transit. We have 1 social service bus operator, which is the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, which has the same board as Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. We also have an intercity train, that's Capital Corridor, and Placer County riders took the bus 1.2 million times in 2018. Every year, we hold this unmet transit needs outreach process to fulfill our requirements for the Transportation Development Act. The Act states that if any of those local transportation funds are used for purposes other than public transit, of which we use some in Placer County, then we have to go around and collect comments finding out if there are any unmet transit needs. We use a variety of tools to reach Placer County residents when we're doing this outreach every year, and there have been many service improvements that have come out of this process, including the ones listed on the slide. And while sometimes these changes aren't deemed unmet transit needs and don't go through the formal process, this outreach gives us an opportunity to find out about things that could be easily changed and is a good way to improve service either way. We use multiple outreach strategies to reach folks during September and October. The majority come through an online survey, which it's been open since September 1st, and so far we have 357 responses to our online survey. We also do more traditional stakeholder engagement. I've been on most of the members of the board's county newsletters and outreach, district updates, alternative transportation email lists, just trying to get to everyone and anyone who might be interested in public transit about this issue. I also do presentations to local social service agencies every year who are interested in this topic, and that's a good way to get comments. And then every year, the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency and El Dorado County Transportation Commission and PCTPA, we all get together up in the Resort Triangle with Board Member Wright to deal with these issues and for folks who live up in the Tahoe area. Also lots of email, social media, newspaper notices, and then today's public hearing is the official public hearing for unmet transit needs as a time we take comments as well. Once I receive all the comments, they're then reviewed by PCTPA staff. So essentially, we compare them to existing service. Is the comment a request for service that already exists? And if so, my response to the comment is the service that already exists to fulfill that need. Then it's compared to the unmet transit needs definition, which was last amended by the board in 2014 and deals with various definitions of the scope of unmet transit need. For example, bus stops aren't considered a part of unmet transit needs process, and it's all in keeping with the Transportation Development Act. And then we determine whether a comment is determined reasonable, which deals with, is the request more expensive than the amount of funds we have to spend on public transit? Is the request consistent with planning goals? And would there be community support for such a transit service? Once all those comments are reviewed, I take them to the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council in January to discuss any potential findings. And it's the Social Service Transportation Advisory Council that makes the final recommendation, which I then present to the board in February. So we're at the beginning of this process, at the end of the outreach process, but at the beginning of the comment process. So there are 3 ways to provide comments. You can provide them today. Our chair will open it up to public hearing, and then members of the public are invited to come up and provide their unmet transit needs comments. You can also continue to use our online survey. It'll be up until October 31st, and that's at pctpa.net/UTN, or you can provide them directly to me at PCTPA. Call me or email me or show up at the office. The best comments are specific, so it's exactly where you live in that neighborhood and exactly where you're trying to go, how often you're trying to take this trip, what time of day you're trying to take this trip, or what the part of the current transit services that isn't working. Those tend to work the best in helping us understand whether a need is unmet. And at this point, I'll take any questions from the board.
Any questions for Ms. Hanley? I see none. Is this the time I open the public hearing? So I'll open the public hearing. Anyone who wishes to address the board on this item, please come forward, state your name.
Lee Bastian, Sheridan Municipal Advisory Council. I'm here to make my annual plea. We have no transit service in Sheridan.
Thanks, Lee.
Thanks, Lee. Come forward, please. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I also live in Sheridan, and I'm here to try to find out why we do not have any transportation to Lincoln, because I have no transportation. I've lived there for off and on for over 40 years, and we've never, to my knowledge, had any transportation. And I'm having to hitchhike, which I've been told by police is illegal. But I'm wondering, if there's no public transportation and you have no transportation. You have no other recourse but to hitchhike. And I have a right to go get groceries and do my other business, but I'm not able to do that because there's no transportation, and I can't get to Lincoln to get to the other places to do it. So, I mean, I'm trying to find out from anybody why there hasn't been any transportation, because it's badly needed. I've talked to other people in my town, and they say they'd use it if we had it, but I've been told, oh, well, there's not enough people that would use it, but they can't say that because they've never tried it, and they've, to my knowledge, have never put anything in the mail, to see how many people use it. And if you have no other transportation, that's putting my life at risk every time I hitchhike. But I go 3 or 4 times a week to Lincoln and back, and I'm having to hitchhike to get groceries or whatever, and it's just not right that we're being left out because we're in Placer County. So I'm trying to find out why we can't get any transportation.
Thank you for your comments. We need your name for the record, and there's a sign-up sheet there.
Hey, David, perhaps you move the sheet over so the next person can speak while.
Yeah. And ma'am, we need your name, if you could give us your name, so we have it on the record.
Patricia West.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Patricia.
Hi, my name is Sheila Hayes, and I depend on public transportation, and I'm disabled, and I have some issues with the dial-a-ride. Most of the drivers that do dial-a-ride in Auburn don't even know where the boundaries are. They just tell me that they can go as far as Joga Road and deviate 3/4 of a mile, but they can't take you past 7-Eleven. And I cannot get dial-a-ride out to my place and stuff. I get bus service from Placer County 5 days a week. I have to catch the bus. I'm in Auburn city limits. I live on Lake Arthur Road, and that right off the freeway and stuff. It's not like a big issue to get there or anything, but they say I get the bus. It runs 2 times 5 days a week there. But anyway, I have to catch the bus back at 3 o'clock, and I'd like to be able to take dial-a-ride. They say they just don't go past Bowman and stuff. And I mean, it's not like I'm way out in the middle of nowhere. I'm just right off the freeway. And there were several other people that made the comment that they would love to be able to get dial-a-ride. The only thing that we have out there is Seniors First. And if I was, and also Meta Vista would like to see if they could get Dial-A-Ride too. I was gonna get some signatures and that, but I've been really busy with my medical stuff lately. So, yeah, I just, I don't understand that, why the Dial-A-Ride cannot, like, if I don't make the 3 o'clock back, why I wouldn't be able to take the Dial-A-Ride home, because I do have a scooter that I depend on, and stuff. And if I have to call an Uber, it costs me, more money. I'm on a fixed income, and it costs me a lot more money than I can afford. So, I mean, I've had to, but, it's really been a hardship. So, if I don't think I'm asking for too much. The other day, as a matter of fact, I asked to be taken up to the overlook, and they told me they couldn't do that. Well, if they can deviate 3/4 of a mile from Joger Road, I don't understand why they can't deviate 3/4 of a mile from 7-Eleven up to that's not even 3/4 of a mile, up to the overlook. And the drivers don't even know where they can go. They just know they can go up and down 49 and not past 7-Eleven. So, anyway, and also, I would like to ask if the Auburn Transit could run later. And that there's a lot of people that work and depend on the thing, but if they would coincide like with Placer County and stuff, it'd be a big help, and things like that. But that's all I have to say.
Thank you. If you please sign in on that.
Okay, thank you.
Next, please. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are y'all doing?
Good.
My name is Walter Lawyer. I'm from Lincoln. And one of the reasons I'm here is just that the transportation in Lincoln is that I've been, for the last 5 years, I've been going to a lot of the need transit meetings, and I'm disabled myself. And many times in the past, my truck was down. I walked from my 8th and Q Street to a mile where they have at the city hall their meeting, because I've been asking for quite some time to have my bus stop put on 8th and Q Street, because that the bus comes up from 3rd to make a left turn on O and makes a right turn on O Street on 5th. But I give them times maps. They're about a minute, 2 minutes apart. A left turn on 5th, go up to Q Street, 3 blocks up, make a right on Q down 8th and Q, where the stop will be. Used to be at one time years ago when the city of Lincoln was running, because I was in a head-on collision back in 2002. It was a very convenience, but she passed on. She was the one changed the route. And I talked many times in these meetings that all the bus guys to do either up to Nicholas Road, back to the stop, make a right turn on Nicholas to the stop, back right turn, that'd be O Street, all the way back down to 5th, then make a left turn and go back out again. And so it's only like a few blocks difference that make it more convenient for the ridership, that when I'm a property taxpayer and I pay a boatload of property taxes and I'm a registered voter, I have to depend on the money that I'm paying for the services that the buses, I own part of it, I pay for the driver, that there's a lot of confusion. And the confusion is they haven't Angela, one time they were going to take a bus, try out the route. 3 years ago, that never happened. How long does it take? And all the time I always say, it all depends how fast the driver's driving. If his driver's slow, we'll be slow. But they're not really, they make it like it's going to take time out of their way. They're not even taking nothing out of the way. They're not even put a pole in the ground. I always tell them, just take a plaque, put it on the stop sign, and that's it. That's it. And because I go to school, I'm leaving town, I'm not local in town. I know they have a dial ride, but that dial ride is only for local entities, for the local ridership, and you have to make an appointment. And it would cost me more money to pay more money for bus fare when I just pay it once. And so that's the reason I'm here for. I need to have that bus stop put in place, because when Gail took the stop out, it makes it more inconvenient. Because when my mom comes from Sacramento, she's 84, and she's disabled. But where they have to walk 6 to 8 blocks up one direction, that's hard. You know, if the only thing to just give it a try, it's probably no longer, and then put something that it's more realistic. Because a lot of times I address the city hall, and I address the public transportation many times. But the confusion is, they say, is go to the city. I've done that. Or go back to the Placer County Transportation Board thing again. I've done all that. So where's the middle of everything? And because there's no middle. Either there's a left or right. Or maybe it's just the management who runs the services gets confused. Or maybe they just need to have new management who knows what hardship is about. You know, they know what it is, disabling. And it's the now thing, not the future. Then this is what a lot of problems are. They always talk about the future, but not now. It's the now thing. It's the importance.
Thank you, Walter. Would you please
Yes.
sign in the chest?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Yes.
Anyone else? Good morning, Tink.
Good morning. I'm Tink Miller, Executive Director at Placer Independent Resource Services here in Auburn. We're the state and federal designated independent living center serving Placer, El Dorado, and Alpine counties. And we're not a residential facility. We work with seniors and people with disabilities to help them be as independent as they're able for as long as they're able. And it's a pleasure to be here. And I'd like to actually just start by acknowledging that a great deal of improvement has occurred over the past year incrementally among the operators. They take the input to heart, even if it's not something found reasonable to meet from year to year, and they try to look at their systems and integrate what changes they can with scheduling, routing, timing, and we have the Connect card system now for handling fares, so people don't have to carry quarters to have the exact change. So all those kinds of little things have made the system more accessible, and I just like to acknowledge that. Some of the specific things that I've heard about from some of our constituents, a lot of excitement and happiness about the change in Auburn Transit System's routing recently, going up Luther Road and coming down Derry. People are really excited about that. However, one person tried to arrange for a deviation for a ride to go to the powwow last Saturday, and called on Thursday, told to call back Friday, called Friday. The person that answered the phone wasn't able to provide the information necessary, was told to call back Saturday, which went to a voicemail. And he tried a second number and it went to a different voicemail. So there needs to be some information, probably on the website, but other places, about how users of that system can request a deviated ride because he wasn't getting accurate information and he missed the powwow, so he was kind of sad about that. Some folks that live on the edge of Rockland, there's a senior apartment complex near the city line. They continue to need some more flexibility in the Rockland shuttle, and also when they're using Dollar Ride, to be able to cross the Dollar Ride system in general needs to be able to cross jurisdictional lines so that people can avoid unnecessary transfers that make the trips longer than necessary. So we need agreements between the jurisdictions that would allow Dollar Ride to make more seamless rides and get those users to where they need to go in a more timely kind of way. There's been requests for more bus shelters, and I know in particular with Placer County, they've been working, and I don't know if they're done yet, with updating their ADA plan across the county. And I know they've looked at bus shelters, so I would encourage the other jurisdictions, the cities, to look at their own ADA plans or work with their transit operator around looking at the bus shelters, where they're located, where they're needed. If it's part of your ADA plan, does it need to be updated? Maybe find out from your constituents if it maybe needs to be reprioritized because of growth in the area. So those are important, especially in very hot weather or very cold, snowy, rainy weather. People really rely on shelters. And finally, I just want to really emphasize marketing. It is a huge, huge vacuum. People do not know what's available. They don't know how to use it, how to access it. They don't know where to get the information. They get confusing information. I hear this constantly. Don't assume that people know how to use the system or how to read the schedules. A lot of people don't understand. So please put money into marketing. Thank you.
Thanks, Tink. Is there anyone else wish to address the board on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any questions or comments from board members? All right, seeing none, so you have information. All those concerns and comments will be addressed in the upcoming, through the process.
Yes.
Right? Thank
The
you so
report
much.
will come back in February to the board with the
All right.
analysis.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hanley. So now we'll move to item I, the consent calendar, Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. Any item, does anyone want this item to be discussed? Seeing none, anyone in the audience wanted to speak to this item? All right, I'll bring it back for a motion on approval.
Move approval.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar of Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none. Now we're going down to item K, Health Express Services Letter of Task Agreement and Master Agreement. Ms. Hanley again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe there's a presentation for this item. Thanks, Jeremy. So I'm going to begin with some background on our Health Express service because I believe it's been a while since the members of the board have been presented with this item. So Health Express is the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency's largest program. It provides demand response, non-emergency medical transportation. So they can pick you up at your house and take you to a doctor's appointment. Oftentimes it's used as needed for individual medical appointments, but it's regularly used for subscription rides for folks who have dialysis and chemo. And it's particularly important as it serves seniors and individuals with disabilities who oftentimes don't have another transportation option. There's a large service area, as you can see in green, shown on the map on the slide. And this service operates Monday through Friday from 7:30 to 4:30. It serves the whole service area except for trips to and from Sacramento are only available on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and trips to and from Sheridan and Forest Hill are only available on Wednesdays. It is a more complicated management structure than maybe some of our other programs, but we find that it works well. So Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency funds the service and determines the service policies, editing them over the years. Then we work closely with Seniors First, who reviews the client applications, manages complaints, and that allows them to connect a lot of our clients for Health Express service to many of the other services that Seniors First provides. Then we contract out the actual running of the service completely to, in the last contract, MV Transportation Services. So they supply the fuel, the fleet, the drivers, all the training. They manage the day-to-day trip reservations. And that allows us to keep a small staff here at PCTPA because it's a turnkey operation operated by a private operator. Health Express started out as a Pride program back in the early 2000s. And then when WPCTSA was formed in 2008, we started contracting with Pride Industries to provide a similar service. In 2013, we did our first joint procurement with the Placer County Department of Public Works for their dial-a-ride service. And that contract ends at the end of this month, which is why I'm presenting this item to the board today to discuss the new contract moving forward. We once again went with a joint procurement with the county, and the reason that we did this is that it's been very productive. It was productive the last contract time, and it's been productive this time. It allows for cost savings, combining our dial-a-ride service and our Health Express service together. It makes for a larger service to be more attractive to bidders, and then we share the overhead and maintenance, management costs throughout the life of the contract. There's also increased service efficiency. The drivers are used on both services, so they're familiar with the service policies for both and can oftentimes be a really helpful resource for our clients. We released the request for proposals in June of this year, and then despite reaching out to 20 companies and getting multiple requests for information about the service, we only received one proposal in July. That proposal was reviewed in August by members from CTSA, the county, the cities of Lincoln, Rockland, the town of Loomis, and members of Seniors First. That proposal was from MV Transportation, the existing provider of our service, and that panel of folks who were evaluating that proposal determined that both CTSA and Placer County should move forward with negotiations with MV Transportation for the new contract. CTSA has been negotiating with MV Transportation for the last few months, and today I'm bringing the contract renewal to the board for your consideration. Placer County will bring their dial-a-ride contract to the board in November. MV Transportation's proposal, I've included the full scope of services in your board agenda. However, it's quite long, so I'm going to focus on the changes from the last contract to this contract. By and large, it's the same service. That's, as I'm going to start with, one of the big benefits of moving forward with the same operator is that it's a smooth transition for our clients. As I mentioned, these are seniors and folks with disabilities who really rely on this service, so being able to provide a smooth transition of the same service moving forward is really a benefit for us. In addition, MV Transportation also operates Roseville Transit Service and the South Placer Call Center service. So there's a lot of great efficiency in having the same private operator between these services in terms of getting communication and getting what would otherwise be complicated problems to fix to solve between these various entities. There's also an improved maintenance location in this new contract. Previously, the maintenance facility was in Sacramento. Now the facility will be in Loomis, which not only brings jobs to Placer, which I know we're always happy about, it also brings the maintenance location into our actual service area, which will be more efficient in terms of reduced travel for the buses when they're not in service. There is a higher cost with this new contract. The contract is actually 60% higher than the last contract, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why that's the case. First, we're expanding service hours. Currently, we operate about 4,500 vehicle service hours on Health Express every year, and we're moving up to 6,800 vehicle service hours. So when you break down the current contract, which as I mentioned ends this month, what it costs us per revenue hour, and the proposed contract, the difference is only about 7%. So some of that cost increases to deal with this increase in service. There's also a growing senior population. As members of the board are well aware, there are 13,000 more seniors living in Placer County than there were in 2013 when we last served this service for contract. A good percentage of those, 20%, have a disability, and many live in poverty. And transportation is a major issue for those seniors, particularly the ones who are aging in place in our rural communities. Health Express is one of the only transit options in our rural communities, and so the service is really important, and being able to add that extra service hours and expand that service is going to be important to serve these growing populations. as I mentioned, there's limited rural transportation service, and oftentimes connecting folks with at least some way to get their medical appointments starts to at least give them some option in terms of how to get transportation. And as I mentioned, and as Seniors First will mention, this partnership also allows us to get those folks who are using Health Express service connected to other services in Placer County. So if they're reserving their reservation and they mention that they haven't gotten food, Seniors First can connect them with a food closet, and there's a lot of good connection happening, particularly with the rural folks. When you look at the cost per vehicle revenue hour, it's $95 for our current, as you can see the first blue bar, that's the current proposal that is for your consideration today. So Will Garner from County Public Works and I went and discussed with other folks who operate a similar dial-a-ride demand response type service to see what their costs are per vehicle hour, which I've shown on the slide. It's important to keep in mind that all of these services have their own vehicles, and most of them provide their own fuel or maybe provide their own drivers. So the big cost difference between us is that we're operating a turnkey operation, and that is to keep our staffing costs low at PCTPA so that the whole thing is on the private contractor. So that second blue bar is an attempt to kind of approximate what our contract costs would be if we took out some of the vehicle and the fuel costs that other operators take in-house. So we feel that this proposal is in line with what the market rate is for this kind of service. So the staff recommendation is to authorize the executive director to negotiate and sign Letter of Task Agreement 2001 and the master agreement with MV Transportation, Inc. to provide the Health Express service. This was presented to the Transit Operators Working Group and the Technical Advisory Committee, both of whom concur with the staff recommendation. And then I'll be happy to take any questions from the board at this time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hanley. Any questions or comments from board members?
I might have one.
Push your
If I
luck.
can find a button.
Supervisor.
Cheryl, if you would.
I'm always in the way of your button.
I just wanted to say thank you for the detailed financial analysis. That was very helpful.
You're welcome.
And you're
So really more of a curiosity. Down at SACOG, there are increasing conversations about how to do transit differently, given all the changes. And so I'm wondering if a cost analysis has been done to see if it would be cheaper to simply hand out Uber cards to those frequent users rather than running a fixed system. I just don't know if that's been explored, if that makes any sense, or if it does not.
Sure. I'm going to, once I take a couple of your guys' questions, I'm going to invite two members of the Seniors First staff to discuss a little bit on their side of this partnership with Health Express. But I'll give a teaser in that they're starting to work with some of the transportation network companies to provide service for part of our My Rides program. Basically, if we can't get volunteer drivers for one of our services, what does it look like to start subsidizing with an Uber and Lyft type service? And so what we see this extension of the contract is to ensure that we're at least providing the service that folks rely on as we continue to explore these more technologically driven and innovative approaches to provide transportation. And this contract includes many clauses in terms of how we could move away from this contract if during the life of it we choose to move towards something else, which is definitely something that we're looking into. But we just want to make sure that particularly folks who rely on dialysis and chemo and that kind of thing can still get the transportation they need in the meantime.
Understood. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question, if I may. So the increase, I think it's terrific that we're looking at increasing the availability of it. How was that measured? How did you determine exactly what type of expansion would occur?
Sure. So it was recommended in the short range transit plan, the type of expansion. And right now, as we've been moving forward with the contract negotiations process, just been a flat number of expansion to 6,800 hours. But as we move forward with the contractor, once this contract is signed and executed, then we'll decide how those hours should be best allocated to meet the needs. Should we expand trips to Sacramento, for example, or should we add more hours during a certain time of the day when trips are particularly popular? So moving forward, I'm going to be sorting out exactly how those hours will lay out, and they'll obviously flex from time to time. But that brings us to a service hour amount that we think is reasonable to meet the demand, while also allowing us to get enough drivers, which continues to be a challenge in the transit industry across the board.
Okay, so from the analytics standpoint, then you'll be working through assessing best use.
Yes.
And ensuring the best return. Because hearing some of the comments today on individuals that need the services, we
Yes.
certainly want to provide it. Working at UPS, certainly we look at how we utilize our drivers best, and so it's good to hear you'll be working on that, so thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Any other comments from board members? Anyone in the audience wish to address any?
If you don't mind, Mr. Chair, before we do public comment, I'd like to introduce Stephanie Viestra and Debbie Tyler from Seniors First staff to talk a little bit about their perspective
good.
on Health Express.
That would be great. Thank you. Morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Debbie Tyler with Seniors First, and I manage both the My Rides Health Express programs, which is our transportation department, and our information and assistance unit. And I thank Kathleen for kind of giving us the lead into how those all connect together for us. Health Express, I wanted to give you a few numbers as to what we do. We're the entry to Health Express. So you send in the applications. We're averaging 30 to 35 applications a week. A month right now, which you can see is going to be a huge number for the year increase. They already have over 600 active riders with Health Express. In addition, we do what's called a 3-year renewal. So we send out people that have already been with the service a renewal application to ensure that they're still living in the county they need the program. We're sending out an average of 10 to 12 a month. Only 2 of those are coming back. So that shows you only about 20% of the people either remain eligible or are interested in continuing this service. We believe that's because those people become much more fragile once they hit 3 years out from going on the Health Express program. It also shows us a tremendous increase about by 3 times what we were doing 3 years ago as far as applications. Because if we're getting 33 a month right now, we only had 12 to 13 that were approved 3 years ago. That's a huge leap in the ridership as well. So that's been an issue for us. We also are funded to do the My Rides program, which is a program that runs 7 days a week from 7 to 7. It's a donation-based service using volunteer drivers to drive us, and we do about 500 rides a month. When I say 500 rides, it's 500 one-way trips. So going from here to the doctor and back home again is considered 2 rides. We have about right now 55 drivers and over 600 active riders in the My Rides program. The difference between the 2 programs is My Rides doesn't allow people with wheelchairs, it does allow people with walkers and possibly oxygen, but they need to be able to manage their own equipment. So the people that ride on Health Express are far more fragile. They need a lift to get on and off. They are riding scooters, they are riding in wheelchairs. They're utilizing wheelchairs. So it makes a huge difference in the type of service. Obviously, we don't always meet the need for everyone. Part of our contract indicates that we have voucher money available to us. As Kathleen mentioned earlier, previously we had a contract with Macy's Transport, which retired after 35 years of business here in Auburn. And we have moved to what's called 123 Easy Rides, which is an Uber connection service. Many seniors don't have an app on their phone. I'm going to be one of those, okay? Don't have an app on my phone, don't even want to try the app on my phone. But they have a connection with Uber where you can telephone them, they set up the ride. They also train their drivers especially to work with seniors. And we have had a great success with them. They are about 1/3 of the cost of the vouchers we were doing previous to August when we started using them. So Uber shows us that it's much less expensive. For an extra $2 charge, they will do a little bit over and above service, walking people to the door, helping them with equipment, and they specially train most of their drivers to be able to work with senior citizens. If for some reason we don't have voucher money available, we are also giving out the name of the 123 Easy Rides program through our information and referral service to our seniors. We've had a couple of glitches, but we figured out what they are, and we've been able to hand walk them through or do what we call a warm handoff to the 123 Easy Rides program. And it's been very, very successful, and many of our people are using it independently. So I've explained 123 Easy Rides. One of the things I wanted to let you know is we gave you one of our new handbooks that just came out last week. We're publishing about 50,000 of these. They go out into the community. It includes a transportation section. And inside the book, I tucked for you our non-emergency transport services list. So when people call us, if we aren't able to provide a ride through the My Rides program, they can't dial a ride for some reason. If there's not availability of Health Express, We provide them with a list of phone numbers of alternative services that may be available in Auburn, in the Auburn area and in Placer County as well. I think the biggest thing that having this service with Seniors First really works for seniors. The biggest thing that comes from it is if a rider calls in and they just don't call and say, I need a ride. We also don't just say, okay, you need a ride, we'll send you an application for the My Rides program or for Health Express. We ask more questions than that. Example, we had a family most recently that drives from the Auburn area to Sacramento to McClellan Air Force Base. He is a veteran. He has multiple health issues. His wife is unable to drive him all the time because she has her own health issues, and she drives locally but not to McClellan. They had 9 rides in a matter of 28 days they needed to schedule with us, either with Health Express and or with the My Rides program. We spoke with them at length, connected them with the Veterans Administration and their own doctor. They now have a case manager that can help them better coordinate their health care, because 9 times to the doctor is an awful lot in 1 month. Let's kind of bunch them up a little bit if we can, whatever we can do to help them. And then the other thing that we found out is that the VA has a voucher system, and they're using Uber and Lyft. And this family qualified for that voucher system. So we are working with them right now, because this happened 2 weeks ago, by the way. We're working with them right now so that they can work with their case manager to use their own voucher to get Uber, and that's going to free up those 9 rides that they had a month to use for someone else in the county. So we're kind of excited about how the Information and Assistance Unit and the My Rides and Health Express Unit all work together.
That's great.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to say that, also when they come for a ride, that's just one of the things that they need. And our staff is able to identify what really they need in their life. And so we're able to connect them with Meals on Wheels and things like that and other resources in the community. So they have a community around them to help them, not just a ride. Any questions?
We need your name. We need your name. We got yours.
Stephanie Verstraat, I'm the Executive Director of Seniors First.
Okay, thank you for the record. Any questions for these ladies? Yeah.
I just want to commend you for doing something like this for our seniors and our disabled citizens. Having a paper like this that they can refer to is huge. As you spoke about technology and the disabled people and the seniors, they don't use smartphones, and so unfortunately, with the idea of having an Uber ride, it is scary and also hard because they don't have the technology. And I just want to commend you so much for the work that you're doing. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Thank you so much for your presentation and all the work you do. Okay. Now anyone from the public who wishes to address us, this is the time to come forward.
Is that yours? I thought you were using.
I'm back again. My name is Patricia West, and I've tried, like I said, I live in Sheridan, and I've tried to get Seniors First. I've been trying to get them for the last 3 to 4 days now, and haven't been able to connect with them to get rides to my doctor, to get rides to grocery shopping or whatever I need, because like I said, there is no public transportation in Sheridan. So what am I supposed to do when I can't even get a ride to my doctor because I can't get a hold of Seniors First? I can't get a hold of anybody in transportation to get, and then I'm told that, I have to make it a month in advance, or we don't go out to Sheridan because we don't have any drivers that would go that far. Sheridan is just 7 miles from Lincoln, so I don't understand why they can't have one of the Lincoln drivers come out to Sheridan. And I'm disabled. I'm a vet. I go to Mather too, so I might need to, I do use DAV, but when they only go to the military facility, they don't go outside if if they send you out to private doctor, they don't give public assistance for that. So I'm trying to find out from Seniors First or anybody how I can resolve this situation, because I can't walk 7 miles to Lincoln and I can't walk to my doctor's appointment. So
Okay, thank you for your comments, Pat.
Thank you for your comment. I wanted to say that part of the issue with adding those extra service hours, as Board Member Broadway mentioned, is that we've had some capacity issues with folks who are trying to get a ride in our service area with the right service, it just being oversubscribed because of how many people need to use this service. So we're hoping the expansion will allow us to provide more rides.
Okay, thank you. Good morning again.
Good morning again, Tink Miller again. I just need to point out regarding Uber and Lyft, they're not wheelchair accessible vehicles, and this is public transit, and it has to be fully accessible to people with disabilities. So you can't do away with the existing infrastructure of a public transit system and turn it all over to Uber and Lyft, even if it's cheaper. So I'm just pointing that out.
Okay, thank you.
Walter Lawyer again,
Okay.
Lincoln. I've used the service many times in the past, and what happened to me last time, I had a doctor's appointment on Roosevelt Parkway in Douglas. I had an appointment. I called Health Express. They came to my house, and there was 2 other ladies. They had other places. They had other doctor's appointments where the driver dropped them off at the old Walmart over there in Roseville. The Walmart, I don't know the name of that street. It's over by Harbor Freight. And the driver was extremely slow, and I got there late. And I need at least a good 45 minutes because I had to go see the endocrinologist doctor. But what happened, the driver said that he was going to come back from lunch to pick me up, but he decided to go to Auburn to pick up somebody else. So I was not going to wait for this driver to come back from Auburn. So I just took the public transit and just went home. And because what happened, it just lost the trust of the driver. The service supposed to help. And I said to myself, I need to make my doctor's appointments. So that's why I just took the fixed bus, easier than trying to depend on somebody else, what they're going to do. So that's what I have to say.
Okay.
Well, comments about these others, whether transportation issues, why don't they extend the bubble out to use the smaller buses to pick up these passengers where they need to be taken to the main bus service, or at least like a shuttle that picks up everyone and goes to a destination place, and where they can just pick up the regular fixed bus, take them to where they got to go. And it seemed like to me the Ubers and the Lyft transportation, why don't they just use Connect cards? Use the Connect card, they charge up them how many dollar bills they put on there, they scan it, and that's probably be a lot simpler than trying to use gift cards or cards, but trying to fix this. It just seemed like to me that it'd probably be a lot simpler. And where they have the fixed bus, instead of calling on the telephone, adding dollar bills to our Connect cards, they should able to have a thing where they don't have it. I mentioned many times about this. When you pay your dollar bills into the bus, the driver should be able to put how much dollar bills, swipe the card, it loads it up automatically. And I think that's kind of a great deal because they don't have it yet. And I hear comments that that'd be a lot simpler, because the driver that is putting, put the, like your all-day, 24-hour pass already, it just seems to just be a lot easier trying to call either Regional Transit. It's hard to get to that line, or do you have to call the county, or if they don't do it right, sometimes you have to wait for a Monday so they can enter the dollar amount figures on their Connect cards.
Okay, thank you for your comments, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so they always say, just do it smarter, not harder.
Right.
Right.
Got it. Anyone else wish to address us on this item? Seeing none, we're being asked to have the executive director sign a services letter of task agreement and master agreement with Health Express Services. Is that correct? Yes.
So moved. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the item. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none. Thank you, Ms. Hanley. Now we'll move to item L, fiscal year 2019-20 overall work program and budget amendment number 1. Mr. McNeil-Caird.
Good morning, Chair Holmes, members of the board. Each of you have a document in your packet, which is amendment number 1 to the work program and budget for this fiscal year 2019-2020. The amendment is very similar to the final that the board approved back in May, with a focus on core agency activities and project implementation. I'm just going to take a second here to walk through a couple of work program changes between the final and amendment number 1. If you look at work element number 12, that's our intergovernmental coordination. We've added grant funding for our staff, actually Aaron Hoyt, to participate in the CalCog Regional Leaders Academy. Work element 27, that's the Airport Land Use Commission, ALUC. That reflects board direction to update the ALUC plan based on the latest Auburn Airport narrative report, layout plan and narrative report. We also plan to review the existing ALUC fee structure. Work element 33, that's bikeway planning. We've added participation in the 6-county regional parks and trails strategic development plan that's being led by SACOG. And then work element 42, this is the Highway 65 widening project. The board did approve a budget adjustment to complete design for phase 1. Then we have work element 43, this is the I-80 auxiliary lanes. The board approved federal funding to complete design and right-of-way on that project. We also have a new work element. This is work element 46. This is the mobility action plan. And we did receive a Caltrans grant for $650,000. And this is to identify a priority projects to then submit for state and federal funding in 2022. And then on work element 50, this is project programming and reporting. We've added funding to submit grant applications for state funding in 2020, next year. And then lastly, work element 60, this is our regional transportation funding strategy. We've updated the we've updated it to reflect the board approved consultant contract, and we're also going to be updating the sales tax projections. Staffing levels remain the same at 7 full-time equivalent staff. And I do want to make a note on the budget. You'll see that it has increased by $1.3 million. A majority of that is because Caltrans requires that we include the entire $650,000 grant in the budget this year, even though we're going to spend it over a number of years. And even with this change, the budget does balance, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. McCarron? I see none. Anyone in the audience wish to address us on this item? See none? Well, we'll bring it back to the board for approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the fiscal year 2019-20 overall work program and budget. Amendment number 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none. We'll now move to item J, fiscal year 2019 budget item number 1, Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. Ms. Hanley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The proposed budget amendment number 1 for the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency was included in your agenda. I'm going to focus on the changes as is my usual. So the first major change is in the programs, an increase in cost for our Health Express service. As the board just reviewed, there's an increase in cost. So this budget reflects that increase in cost for the new contract. And it is within the budget that was originally proposed in July to accommodate that increase in cost. The second change is that when the budget went to the board in June, there was one large item for transit planning that has been broken up into 3 categories for our internal accounting purposes, but there's no change in overall amount. And then both the LTF and state transit assistance amounts have been altered to reflect the final estimates from the state. And I'm happy to take any questions on the budget.
Any questions, board members, regarding this item? See none. Anyone in the audience wish to address us on this item? See? So close.
Is this transportation, is this included with new buses on the new buses or anything?
So this budget is just for the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. We don't own any buses.
Oh, I thought it was like the improvements on the buses.
No.
Oh. So this is about the budget for the transportation?
It's about the budget for the programs that the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency operates, which includes the Health Express service, which the contract was just brought to the board on a previous item, as well as a number of other small
Okay,
programs that we operate.
Just like those Connect cards I was talking about.
It was the same as that item.
Oh, it's the same repeat.
It's the budget of which that program is a part of.
Oh, okay. Are they going to talk about the buses too on here?
We don't have buses.
We don't own any buses. I'm not
We don't
sure
have buses.
what buses you're referring to.
I'm talking about the Placer County buses.
There is no item on the agenda for Placer County buses.
Oh, because I know they need new buses. Okay,
All right,
thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more public comment, we'll bring it back to the board for action. This is the fiscal year 2019-20 budget amendment number 1 for Western Placer Consolidated. It's been moved and seconded to approve item J. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Hearing none, we'll move to item M, 2020 Regional Transportation Improvement Program adoption.
I have this item. So every 2 years, we get a chance to update our Regional Transportation Improvement Program, and this determines the projects that get included in the state Transportation Improvement Program, or it's referred to as the STIP. In previous years, the STIP has provided funding for Highway 49 improvements in Auburn, the I-80 Sierra College Boulevard interchange in Rockland, and also the I-80 Douglas Boulevard interchange in Roseville. In 2002, the board approved moving forward with a $78 million advance for the Lincoln Bypass, which attracted a significant state and federal funding for the $291 million Phase 1, which of course was open to traffic in October of 2012. For the 2020 STIP, additional funding has been added for Senate Bill 1, and that has brought our interest-free loan down to $15.6 million by 2028. The good news is we have an interest-free loan. The bad news is we probably won't see new capacity for projects until about mid-2030s. The proposed 2020 RTIP does not include any additional projects, but it does include $723,000 over 5 years for PCTPA to plan, program, and monitor projects. So we're requesting board approval for Resolution 1928 to adopt the 2020 Regional Transportation Improvement Program. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. McCary?
One quick question.
Oh, yes.
Luke, given the governor's decision to redirect SB1 monies, any concerns there?
I can answer that. So there is an executive order to redirect some of this funding. What we're finding in all the workshops that we're attending, this is mostly related to Senate Bill 1, is that to be competitive for that funding, you really need to bundle projects together. And so you'll see actually in our next presentation some of the multimodal projects that we're looking at to bundle with some of our operational and highway projects to be competitive in those programs still.
All right, but you've included SB1 monies in this. Are they at risk given the governor's actions?
In the STIP for us, no, because we got that nice big interest-free loan, and so we're just paying that back, and that funding is not being redirected.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, anyone in the public want to speak to this item? See none. So now we're being asked to adopt the 2020 Regional Transportation Improvement Plan.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve item M. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none. We'll now move to item N, Placer Sacramento Gateway Plan Project Overview. Mr. Melko.
Good morning, members of the board. Today we're going to provide you an overview of a planning process that we've been engaged in since early spring. It's called the Placer Sacramento Gateway Plan. If the board recalls, back in January, we brought a contract forward with Fair & Peers to conduct the study. The Placer Sacramento Gateway Plan is a comprehensive multimodal corridor plan that will allow us to remain competitive for Senate Bill 1 funding. Today, we have a joint presentation by myself as well as Fair & Peers staff. We have Ron Milam and Greg Behrens from Fair & Peers, and they will join in the presentation here. So today's presentation, introduce the plan's Sacramento Gateway Plan. We call it the Gateway Plan. It's, as I noted, a comprehensive multimodal corridor plan. We will talk about the public engagement process. Of course, with any planning process, you need to talk about the analytical, the analysis part, and the results. And so that's why we have the consultant team, so they'll delve into those details. And then we'll talk about the next steps. So the Gateway Plan Corridor. So what you have pictured here is the Gateway Plan Corridor. It's a corridor that spans from Auburn to downtown Sacramento and from Lincoln to Interstate 80. There's approximately a 2-mile buffer, which is the area that we kind of looked at with respect to projects within that corridor. We'll note that there's about 387,000 employees in this corridor. And actually, I was quite surprised by the statistic. There's about 80,000 college students that reside within this corridor and that travel. So the plan overview here, we have a strategy team that consists of 4 partners. Obviously, PCTPA, we have Caltrans District 3, we have the Capital Corridor Agency that is a partner, and the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. We also have a project development team that consists of 14 agencies. Those agencies include the jurisdictions as well as local transit operators that are located along the study corridor. Our primary goal here, as I indicated in my opening remark, is to have this corridor plan make us be competitive for discretionary transportation funding programs, primarily the SB1, Senate Bill 1 programs. So specifically with this effort, we are looking at the state's Solutions for Congested Corridors program, which is funded through Senate Bill 1. The Solution for Congested Corridors program has 4 statutory requirements: reduce congestion, provide more transportation choices, as well as preserve the overall character of the community, and create opportunity for neighborhood enhancement type projects. The program is administered by the California Transportation Commission. They are responsible for the oversight of the program and of project delivery, and they conduct the evaluation and the award of projects for this discretionary program. So briefly on the plan process here, and I'll introduce Ron Milam here, who will pick it up after this particular slide. We start with a pool of projects. We look at the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, Sustainable Community Strategies, too many acronyms. And that's where we start with our pool of eligible projects. And partly that's because the state guidelines require a consistency with the Metropolitan Transportation Plan and the Regional Transportation Plan. We compile data from the public agencies, and we look at the corridor priorities through a public engagement process that also takes into account community values that were brought forward by the local agencies. As I noted, we conduct an analysis, and then we will prepare a draft and final plan. And the draft plan will come to this board for review in December, and we hope to bring the final plan back to the board for acceptance in January. The Solutions for Congested Corridor Plan grant application is due in June, and so we will have a busy spring. And with that, I will turn it over to Ron Milam, the Fair and Pierce.
Thank you, David. As David mentioned, we have a list of candidate projects that came to us from the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Those projects are mapped on the screen here for you. And you can see there's a wide variety of project types, everything from bicycle and pedestrian projects to major improvements actually on the freeway corridor and including the Capitol Corridor. So when you look at a broad list of projects like this, we needed to create a process where we could go through and think about and evaluate which projects would actually compete best given the criteria that the CTC has put forward in terms of this particular grant application program. So that was a key part of our focus. I also want to point out that the criteria that CTC starts with, the statutory criteria that David had up on the slide a minute ago, I'll go back to it in fact. This is pretty important. These 4 blue bullets here: reduce congestion, produce more travel choices, preserve the character of the community, and create an opportunity for neighborhood enhancement. I refer to that as a Goldilocks project. You got to be able to check all those boxes. It's very difficult to do when you typically think about the types of projects that come through a normal planning process where you might be trying to fix a bottleneck or to close a gap in maybe a regional bikeway system. So we're being cognizant of this, but it is a tough bar to jump over. In terms of how we've gone about the process, want to highlight some things for you about things like data collection. Data collection is usually somewhat innocuous part of the planning process. And the first 5 bullets here are pretty common data elements you'd see in most plans, things like traffic volumes and transit ridership. There's a final bullet here, though, big data, that I want to highlight for you because this is data that's been purchased as part of the planning effort. And it's mobile device data. So those smartphones you're carrying around, we're tracking you, trying to figure out what you're doing, why you're traveling, where you're traveling to. And this is data that not only is useful for this study, but can be used in subsequent studies. And it gives us some insights that would be hard to figure out without it. So for example, we've got the chart here on trip length distribution. We can actually look at the users in the corridor and understand how far they're traveling and where they're traveling to. We can also discern some of the demographic information about those travelers to help us make sure that we target improvements to what those users are actually doing today. We can also look at all 365 days of the year. One of the things that you might notice as a regular user of the corridor is during the winter ski season, congestion on Fridays gets much worse. Well, there's about a 23% increase on Fridays compared to the typical midday week, and we can actually discern that type of information from this new big data source. Now, as part of the process here, to try and filter that long list of projects down to the most competitive ones that would compete well for the grant money, we did have to go through a priority process here and try to understand the priorities of all the agencies in the corridor. So we have what we call agency values, and these are goals and policies that are already expressed in adopted plans, like the general plans for each community, things like the short-range transit plan, and even the MTP SCS. But we also went through a process to engage with the community, and this includes stakeholders, the public, and users of the corridor, to assess their community values, what was important to them about the corridor, and you'll see some additional slides on that content. And then we also have to balance the CTC criteria. We have to pay close attention to that because that's going to determine how CTC scores individual projects. So it's a bit of a balancing act here in trying to establish the priorities for the plan. Now, in the engagement process, it really did start with our strategy team, which is the 4 agencies that David listed, the project development team of the 14 member agencies, and then the last group, which is this combination of stakeholders, community, and users. And so we've done outreach meetings, got another one coming up here next week, where we've assessed what was important to the community and the users to help us through this process. And to share a little bit about the feedback that we've heard so far, stakeholders. We tried to assess values in 3 simple buckets. What was important to them in terms of what do they want to protect about traveling in the corridor today? What do they want to avoid if we're going to make modifications to the corridor? And what would they like to see us create as part of the plan in terms of making changes? So the things they want to protect, they want to protect the existing travel options. They like the travel options that they have. And especially when it comes to the public transit services for senior, youth, low-income populations, those were very important to maintain, if not enhance. Things they wanted to avoid: don't reduce the transit services that are out there. Don't reduce or modify the reliability. Wanted to avoid land use sprawl, which continued to put higher dependence on using autos to get around. And also avoid unnecessary tax increases. I think there was some recognition that a high-quality transportation network tends to require investment, but let's be wise with the tax dollars and use them as effectively as we can. And then in create, some of the feedback is not necessarily related to people being absolutely dissatisfied with the fact that they're going to experience some delay out there, but the delays were getting to a point where travel is becoming unreliable. It's hard to plan to make a trip, all the way through the corridor, maybe to downtown Sacramento. And so what they're hoping for were new travel choices, which is in line with the grant funding criteria, new bus and rail service, as well as complete bike and pedestrian facilities. We have some gaps in the regional networks, and getting across interchanges is also a challenge. And then there was interest in more lanes. A lot of the public in particular and the stakeholders felt that there did need to be some additional capacity added in the corridor. As to the community, these were people coming to our workshop or completing an online survey. We'll give you a little bit more feedback on the survey in a second. But a lot of interest from the people that showed up with regards to the commuter trains, taking the Capital Corridor service, which is only the 1 round trip today, and really making more trips available so they could use it as a commuter service, whether just getting to Sacramento or getting to the Bay Area. Trying to deal with the bottleneck that is recognized as the 8065 interchange. Some of the community felt like light rail options that get to bypass all that traffic were good ideas, but also a lot of support for more bicycle facilities. There's plenty of opportunities to ride in a place as nice as Sacramento and Placer counties. Just need more facilities from the eyes of the community. Creating more bus and carpool lanes, and even more lanes specifically for through traffic. Some of the concepts were recognizing that Friday congestion you see out there during ski season is you have a lot of travelers going all the way from the Bay Area to Tahoe. Are there ways to accommodate that differently, including things like express lanes or toll lanes? Now, this user survey is a little bit unique. We've reached out to the community and anybody that wants to take the survey. It's still online at the website there. We're at about 2,800 responses so far, and about 1,600 of those are Placer County residents. About 60% of the Placer residents, and a similar number for Sacramento, use the corridor 5 or more days a week. A high percentage of them, 77%, are driving alone on the corridor. And they are strongly dissatisfied with their travel time. And a big part of that also goes to that reliability I mentioned. Now, in the simple way that I think most users are looking at the problem is they feel like there just needs to be more lanes and that will solve the problem. We want to dive into that particular response in a little bit more detail with you because that is kind of the simple response. You've got too much demand, we need more supply. But there's a lot of consequences of that supply and how it might be utilized, so we're going to show you some analysis that paints a little bit different picture. Now, as part of doing this, these are the performance metrics that CTC has asked us to evaluate. They've cut across a number of different categories, and this is what's becoming a little bit more challenging about going after competitive funds at the state or even the federal level, especially here in the state, where it's not just about fixing congestion. We're expected to look at accessibility to destinations. Congestion and delay is important, but it's got to be balanced against economic development, efficient land uses, avoiding sprawl, for example, the regional air quality and greenhouse gas emissions. That question already came up, and it is one of the criteria that's in the program. And then balancing all that with safety as well. So what does the analysis look like so far? First picture I want to show you is just a sense of how much traffic is out there. So this is average daily traffic. You can take the numbers in the map there and you multiply them by 1,000. So when you see a number like 82.3, that's 82,300 daily vehicle trips moving in that particular direction. So westbound or eastbound on I-80, northbound, southbound on 65. And I'll draw your attention to the I-80-65 interchange area. One of the things that we noted as we've gone through the analysis and been working in the corridor for the last few years is if you look at that southern section of 65, it now rivals Interstate 80 in terms of the total amount of daily traffic. And if you look at the growth plans for South Placer, much of the growth is in the south section and either north or west of the interchange here. So it really draws our attention in terms of where needs are. That southbound section of 65 in particular stands out. When you take this and turn it into travel speeds, this is one of our other big data purchases with speed data. So we have this data for the entire corridor. Again, we can look at different times of year, we can look at different days, but for a typical weekday in the morning, this is what we're seeing in terms of the speeds. What I want to draw your attention to is even though we've got green, two colors of green there, the one that's 51 to 60 miles an hour, realize that this is a freeway corridor posted at 65 miles an hour. When you start to get to about 53, 52 miles an hour, that's what traffic engineers would typically refer to as level service F. That's when breakdown traffic conditions can start to occur and you can quickly drop to speeds as low as 30 miles an hour. The slow speeds right now, especially in South Placer, that southbound section of 65, if you've driven it or drive by, you'll see a standing queue out there for many hours of the day, and that shows up in the data. We also have other common bottlenecks in the corridor going all the way down to one of the worst ones in the region, which is the Business 80 crossing of the American River. The queue there backs up all the way through the Interstate 80 junction at Madison. What this means in terms of that reliability question I raised earlier, is something that we're referring to as planning time index. This is simply an index based on how much planning time do you have to think about or include if you're trying to arrive at an appointment on time. So if the normal trip is 30 minutes from Roseville to downtown Sacramento, on a typical weekday in the AM peak hour, you may have to plan for double that time. And so a 60-minute buffer, if you will, to make sure you arrived on time. That gets to the point that people get frustrated because you see here we've got some sections that are as high as 3.0 or higher. Makes it very difficult to plan your day and to plan multiple appointments. So we saw that frustration come through at the public meetings as well as the user survey. Now with the big data, one of the things we can help you understand is who is contributing to these various bottlenecks. So in this particular slide, we are looking at southbound 65 and trying to understand the origins of the travelers. That's the slide or the picture on the left here, the orange and tan colors there. That shows you where those people are coming from, and the green on the right shows you their destinations. Where are they going to? Now, a high percentage of them are just coming across to I-80 into the employment center that is part of Roseville. But many of them are continuing to downtown Sacramento, Citrus Heights, even West Sacramento. If we expand this far enough, you'll even see them traveling to Davis. So what this tells us is that solving that particular type of bottleneck problem is going to be difficult with things other than high-speed travel. The origins and destinations are just distributed too far apart. It's hard to say that you can put everybody on transit when they live this far away. The type of transit that would probably function best are things like the commuter bus services that you currently operate or Placer County and Roseville operate. We're starting to see that being a more viable type solution in addition to any capacity additions that you may want to consider, and then that's already been part of the SR65 project. The other thing we are trying to look at here in terms of fixing the problem, it has to do with how we diagnose the problem. CTC criteria says we should be looking at new travel choices. And so this is an existing evaluation of the types of choices you have available for different types of trips at different times of day. And you can see when you look across the modes, the private vehicle is the dominant mode that allows you to make all of these trips. Without that kind of high-speed travel, it's very difficult to complete your trip. We do have at least one yes for the Capital Corridor if you're making a very early morning trip and you're okay returning late in the day. No light rail options, especially up in the South Placer section. Some bus, especially in the commuter buses that operate all the way into downtown. And walking and bicycling, because of these widely dispersed travel patterns, really aren't fast enough to be an effective mode. The other thing we want to point to in thinking about the problem, this slide might be a little complicated, but I'll try and break it down for you. When we talk about congestion and we describe it using the slide I showed you on speeds, so people think congestion, the cars are moving too slow. That is a symptom of the fact that those cars have very low seat utilization. So they're carrying basically the driver, maybe one passenger. So there's a lot of empty seats out there. And those empty seats occur because we don't price travel to optimize the use of this public roadway facility. And if you look at comparing Capital Corridor versus the commuter bus versus I-80 in this particular example, you'll see that the transit's doing okay, especially the commuter buses. On average, they're close to, if not over 50% seat utilization. Some of the individual buses are much higher than that, 70%, and there's even complaints at times it's hard to find a seat. But the freeway, so think of the example on the far right here, the PM peak hour westbound, about 30,000 empty seats. So when the public gives us feedback that says we need more lanes, the question for you is, do you want more lanes that are utilized so inefficiently? That's about 25% of the seat capacity. So we're operating the freeway at a very low level of utilization, and can we do a better job through a variety of innovative types of ideas, whether that's information-based, whether it's things like express lanes, adding some type of pricing element? Are there ways that you can solve that problem? And the MTP SES does include express lanes as part of the overall plan concept, and that is included on the I-80 corridor. There's still room to determine exactly what those will ultimately look like, but that is part of the set of corridor projects that we can bring forward in the plan. With that, David will explain to you some of the next steps, and then we'll open it up for questions.
As I noted earlier, so we plan to bring the draft plan to the board for review and comment at the December board meeting. At that point in time, we also hope to be able to present a short list of projects that we believe would be good candidates for the Solutions for Congested Corridor program. At that time, there'll be opportunity for public, to comment, as always, at our board meetings. And then we would come back in January seeking a board acceptance and authorizing the executive director to submit a grant application for the Solutions for Congested Corridor program. That grant application isn't due till early June, but as I noted, there'll be a lot of work preparing that grant application because you're competing against a lot of major metropolitan areas throughout the state who've been quite successful in the past. And after that, it'll be an ongoing process in terms of waiting for hopefully the award by the California Transportation Commission of our grant application, monitoring and with respect to those particular applications, and of course, as Luke noted in the overall work element presentation, that tongue twister there, that we did receive a grant from Caltrans for a subsequent phase for the Placer Sacramento action plan. And so the process will continue, and with that, I'd be glad to take any questions.
Wow. Any questions? Yeah, there's a button there.
It's a lot of information, but this is the first opportunity that we had to be able to provide you with an overview of the process. And so there's a lot coming down the pike, and we thought that this would be the opportunity to do so.
I have a question about the Friday congestion. You spoke about the fact that during ski season it's 23% higher. I just wanted to kind of drill down into that a little bit, because Fridays are horrible every Friday, 365 days a year, especially with a lot of campers and people going up in the summertime. So I just kind of wondered how you got that data.
Yeah, so that data, we can look at a couple different sources for it. So if you're ever paying attention to what's down in the pavement out there as you're driving the corridor, sometimes you'll see what we call loop detectors. Those are actually measuring the cars that go over them. So Caltrans, as part of their system, keeps track of the volumes, And so you can go look at their data. But we can also look at the big data. So the big data that we have from the mobile devices gives us both speeds as well as information about origins and destinations. When you buy that data, you can buy it for the entire year. So you can go look at those individual Fridays. And if you want to go look at a Friday in February or look at all the Fridays together, you could go in and identify exactly how much the speeds change to get a sense for how much does the Friday traffic really contribute to congestion. The number we gave you was that's just the percent of traffic increase in volume. The delays and the congestion is actually much worse, because when a freeway starts to fill up and you get close to capacity, every time you add more traffic, the delay can increase almost exponentially in terms of what you experience.
Question. My question is, how much funding is available in each cycle? And is that funding, would that funding be available to use for improvements on 65 and 80 that we've been discussing, especially 65?
I believe the Solutions for Congested Corridor program has slightly less than 500 million available for the next cycle. As I noted, it's a competitive program. I mean, the projects are capital projects, so construction, it's for construction funding, so we can't use it for design and environmental unless we do a design-build type project. And some of the projects that we hope to bring forward will involve 65 as well as Interstate 80. So I'm not sure if I...
Well, maybe I could add to that also, just specifically to the Solutions for Congested Corridors program, highway capacity increasing projects are not allowed. They will not be funded through that program. So that's why we're looking at some alternative modes of transportation, like you see up here with bike and transit and other options.
So general purpose lanes are not eligible.
Okay, got it.
All right, any other comments?
If I may, Mr. Chair, so certainly looking forward to more discussion relative to the alternatives when we talk about the limitations on what the funding can and can't be used for and how we're going to compete. When you look at the actual movement, and I really appreciate all the data, because you have a rural or suburban area and you have a tremendous amount of movement from that area into a metropolitan area, and you have a lot of empty seats in vehicle movements, but there's a long distance, and that's why you do not see walking or biking to move from those areas. So that's going to be a significant challenge for us that, of course, we're putting in all of your hands to bring to us. So interested in seeing how we work through that, because the options seem to be somewhat limiting to move people into different modes. So I think that's a key challenge for us. Would you agree, or?
Yeah, the challenge is not necessarily moving them to other modes, because even if you were able to do that, if you looked at the numbers in that last slide, there's a lot of focus of congestion relief tends to be, well, we'll put everybody on transit. And that's not a bad strategy. But the number of transit seats is on the left-hand side of the axis is there, so it's measured in the hundreds. So even if we filled up all the transit seats, we would still have a lot of congestion. So you definitely want to, make transit as effective as possible and fill those seats, but don't make the leap that will solve the congestion problem. The congestion problem really demands taking advantage of the 30,000 empty seats in the peak direction, every morning and evening that are in those private autos. And so how do you break down that problem? So traditionally, last 50 years of transportation planning in the U.S., we've literally attacked it with a supply side approach. We'll add more lanes. What we haven't done effectively is think about how to change behavior. And it doesn't all have to be through pricing. That'll be one of the strategies that you'll hear about, and it's included in the MTP. But there's other ways to change people's behavior. You have to think about, why don't we share the seats? What are the constraints or barriers that we don't want to jump in a car with our neighbor? Do we not know where they're going? Do we not know they have a seat available? Some of those types of barriers can be broken down with today's technology. So if you've ever used Waze, they have a carpool feature, and you can join into carpooling through the Waze app. And there's a lot of new technology companies that are looking at that type of solution. How do we get more people in cars? There's also things that can be done these may be more at the state level, for the Ubers and Lyfts, for example. You know, in the Bay Area, as one case study maybe, is they offer you the pooled service, where you basically have a lower fare because you're willing to share your rides and maybe take a little bit longer travel time. The state could put in place rules to say, well, any of those kinds of ride-sharing services should only operate in a pooled service during peak periods, as an example. So those are some of the kinds of strategies that, even though they're not specifically line items in the MTP, the MTP has some line items that are more open to interpretation. So it could be a new form of transit service, how the express lanes ultimately play out and what technology may come along with those. So there is room to be creative and learn from what others are doing, but we are at the very beginning of people trying to think about this problem differently than we have in the past.
I think the challenge is getting people to not only think, but act differently.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot easier to say than it is to do.
Yeah, just one fun analogy. If you remember back to August of 2008, we had a little gas price shock here in California. It got to about $5 a gallon. When we go back and look at data during that period of time, you saw a notable increase in things like carpooling. My own personal story is I had kids in soccer at that time. It used to be that, you know, most of the families, at least I live in Rockland, we would drive 2 cars. One parent would show up with the kid early because you got to drop them off an hour before the game starts. The other parent doesn't want to wait around that long, so they show up at game time. And we drive 2 cars. August 2008 came around, and I noticed that not only was there only 1 car showing up, but oftentimes there was 2 families getting out of it because the gas price sensitivity. So price is a significant factor here. I think one of the challenges with that is how do you do pricing in an equitable way such that you aren't pricing people off the system that really need to use the system? If there's people out there traveling that really don't need to be traveling at that time, okay, it works fine. But if there's other people that are needing to get to work, getting to a doctor's appointment, those kinds of things, and you've priced them off the system and they don't have a good alternative because of the low density land use pattern, that's more of an equity issue.
Thank you. Anyone else? Does anyone in the audience want to talk to us about this? Seeing none, this is an information item. Thank you very much for the presentation. Looks like we have our work cut out for us for several years to come.
We do.
Right. Thank you. Let's see, we're down to, am I on item N now?
Yes, sir. Oh.
What? Item O. Oh, I thought you just said O, just O. Okay, item O, transportation funding outreach strategy update.
On the next 2 items, given the hour, and we know a couple of our board members need to leave soon, I'll make both of these items quick. The update on the transportation funding strategy outreach, you have a memo in front of you. The biggest announcement, which I think you're all very aware of, is the passage of Assembly Bill 1413, which was signed by the governor a couple Fridays ago. We're very happy with the result of that, and will allow us to move forward with our funding strategy so that the board is given an ability next year to make a decision related to a potential sales tax measure for transportation. So this is enabling legislation. It was reduced to a pilot project basis by the state for the counties of Placer, Solano, and San Diego, and therefore they're allowing us to move forward in that manner. There is a change to the legislation as originally presented that would allow us to either include all of the unincorporated area or none of the incorporated area. And with that in light, we have asked our sales tax consultant, HDL Companies, to prepare an updated sales tax analysis. Preliminary results of those, which will be, we will bring back to the board at a future point in time, indicate that there is a relatively no impact on sales tax beyond the $1.23 billion that was projected in our original estimate. They are doing some additional work in terms of per capita comparison for those in the unincorporated area and unincorporated area to allow the board to make some policy choices moving forward. I do have Mark Watts, our lobbyist, our state lobbyist is here, and he'd like to say just a couple words before we move on.
Morning, Mark.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here today. It's a real pleasure. I just want to really thank the commitment of your staff and you board members that were participants in all the different ways that you can, whether it was contacting the chair of the committee, whether it was participating in testimony or in key meetings in the Capitol. The persistence of Placer County was noted by the last committee chairman, McGuire, and that's why we had a chance to get the bill through his committee, and that was the key to this. And we've been working on this for 3 years, and we had some tough times at the end of last session. The author stuck with us, and the chair was very impressed. I think at the end of the day, he doesn't ever want to come through Placer or come near Placer. He's had enough of Placer, but the work you guys did was fantastic and would not have resulted in the enactment of the bill if you hadn't done what you did. So just thank you. It made my job, I won't say simpler, but it made it more effective, and I appreciate that.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Your work.
Also contained within the memo is an update on our outreach strategy, and the one item I did want to note following that discussion in the memo is our polling research, and just to give you a highlight of what's coming to the board next. We are next week doing focus group meetings with residents in Placer County, in the south part of the county, down at a Roseville facility. And then in January, we will kick off our next polling. We will bring those polling results to the board at the January meeting and have a what could be a lengthy discussion about the proposed district and where we move forward from there. We will then have our final poll will then be after the March primary election, and then that will be the point that we would recommend that you make a decision to move forward or not towards a potential November ballot measure. So with that, I'll end my discussion. Be happy to answer any of your questions on our transportation funding strategy. Cherry Spriggs is also here, our lead consultant with FSB Core Strategies, if you have any other additional questions for us.
I just have a comment. I was at a service club breakfast, I guess about a week ago, maybe two weeks ago, and I mentioned AB 1413 and about how the potential of going out for another sales tax, transportation sales tax, and everybody was pretty receptive except for one person who was all upset about the governor's shifting of the transportation fund. So that we need to make sure that we're aware of the impact that may have on us, on our outreach.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments from anyone? All righty. We will now move to the executive director's report, or?
Yes, and just given the late hour, and again, our board members needing to make other appointments, I would say that the memo that I've included in your packet includes updates on the SAFE rule, TDA task force, and baseline road stands. I would just want to point out, if you haven't seen already, there's a new court case this morning, and the Sacramento Bee has a pretty good article on the suit that was filed by the federal government against the state to invalidate the state's cap and trade program. So you might want to take a look at that. That will affect a potential source of grant funding for us, and so the heavy lift continues. So with that, I'll conclude my report. Be happy to answer any questions for me.
Any questions from board members? I see none. We have information items if you wish to look at them. Our next regularly scheduled PCTPA board meeting is December the 4th at 9 a.m. Here in the chambers. Thank you so much for your kind attention and cooperation.
Thank you.